All right, so welcome to another edition of Vinyl Revival Album Encounters. My name is John Copeland. I'm a librarian at the Hennepin County Library in downtown Minneapolis, primarily in the art and music department. And one of the things that I'm quite involved in is our Vinyl Revival program, where we have, over the last couple of years, made our vinyl collection accessible in different ways. And now when the libraries um, having limited services, one of the ways we're doing it is highlighting some of the albums in our collection through programs, virtual programs like this. So Album Encounters is a monthly music discussion series, and sometimes more than monthly, and part of Hennepin County Library's Vinyl Revival program, which is made possible by Minnesota's Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Tonight, we'll all be able to hear the music and discussion the best if you keep your mics muted. Hovering over the screen with your mouse makes a toolbar appear, and if you click on the mic icon, you can mute and unmute. You can also unmute yourself if you want to speak and ask a question. We are going to encourage questions for Milo, but probably even a better way, an easier way, um, is to drop questions and comments and anything you want to say into the chat function. So there's a little speech bubble icon in the toolbar, and you can click on that and open up the chat function, and then you can drop in any kind of questions that you like. So without any further ado, hello Milo and welcome.
Hey, John, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's great to have you here. Uh, Milo and I go back. Let's see. You said, by your estimation, you've now been putting out records and doing shows and stuff now for over 50 years, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, and I have probably known you for over 45 of those years because uh, interesting story is the way that I got to know Milo is he taught me drum lessons back in probably the mid 70s. Um, and I was asking my mom a couple days ago how this came about, and she said, well, she thinks she contacted West Bank School of Music thinking they might have something and it would be close to home, and they suggested you, but then of course it wasn't there. It was at Trestman Music Centers out, I think that's the name of the place, out in Richfield or something.
Right.
Is that where you
Yes.
taught? Yeah.
Yes.
And so it was great. So back then I was like what, 12, 13 years old, and listened to like pretty much, commercial music. And Milo and I would sit and discuss music for like half the lessons. And I never really pursued drums as a career or anything like that. But I remember you not only turned me on to your music, and I started going and seeing your shows and getting your albums. But then you turned me on to like Captain Beefheart, of course, Trump Mask Replica, and I think right at the time you said, "Oh, and he's got a great new album, Shiny Beast Bat Chain Puller," and you turned me on to Public Image Limited, Metal Box, later released as second edition, um, XTC.
Actually, I think act- actually I think that was Lick My Decals Off Baby. Shiny Beast came along quite a while later. I don't know if we were still doing the lesson thing at that time, just devils in the details or whatnot.
Huh. Okay. Well, yeah. But anyway, I know you turned me on to Captain Beefheart to begin with.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, you had an influence on my musical progression, and I started getting into all kinds of other stuff. But like the cool thing is you turned me on to a whole different, like, to your kind of music. And I think when I first met you and started taking drum lessons, you only had two albums out: Blue Freedom's New Art Transformation and Improvisations Being Free. Um, so tell me a little bit about how you got started in music and got started doing the you know free jazz and improvisation and all that, like
Well,
your early.
I'll try to make this as concise as possible. My father was a well-known musician, mentored virtually thousands of people. Elliot Fine. So music was in the home, and I came up, or when I was coming up, I heard a lot of jazz actually. And my go-to story there is that as a 5-year-old kid, I was singing Salt Peanuts around the house. Um, which would crack my dad up. And then I got involved with rock, of course, rebellion, teenage, finding my own way, not really understanding that I was being herded in a particular direction. The corporate decisions, the business decisions, et cetera, et cetera. And after a number of years, I played in some rock bands. And after a number of years, I just became disenchanted with regurgitating hit songs for a concert or some kind of gig or something like that. And at that time, it was an interesting convergence because it was the three albums I always cite that I picked up around the same time were Trout Mask and John Coltrane's Ohm, which is my first Coltrane record. So I'm starting at his what most people would consider his most out. And then Archie Shepp's Mama Too Tight, which had a whole political subtext, and particularly the second side of that record, which is a portrait of Robert Thompson as a young man, and this just opened me up to other possibilities. I was seeing that rock and pop were, for me, just too limited a proposition, and I certainly didn't feel the Trout Mask replica fit into that. Um, and I'd gotten to know at Tressman's a guitar teacher named Scott Munsell, and there was a bassist I knew from high school. He was a couple of years younger than me, Steve Dokken, who went on to be a career professional musician, and we essentially did a power trio. I was just playing drums at the time. The interesting thing about the band was that instead of just doing something a la a band like Cream, where an overt pulse would always be present, when we started playing and we would cover some of their material or material that they were covering, and we were covering their covers, we would head out and start to break down the time as well. So it was much more open. Um, and then from there it was just finding out what else was possible. The neurons were firing, and it was also, I was being motivated by quite frankly, black nationalism, the quest for freedom. And um, there was this whole thing that I've often described to people that was palpable at that time, that we could change the world. And it was quite remarkable. And these impulses were not just in America. I mean, black nationalism fueled free jazz here, but in other parts of the world, people were doing more improvised and open things. Austria, in Japan. So there, it was in the zeitgeist. And I'll try to make this little tangent brief. It was interesting because in 2004, when I was out east, in a week's time, I recorded and hung out with Anthony Braxton, and I had the extreme pleasure of meeting one of the true fathers of this music, Bill Dixon, and we spent a day together with bassist Andrew Lofkus. This is the kicker. During the colloquium that I did, Anthony asked me, he said, "Could you describe to the students what it was like at that time?" That's the way Anthony talks, which is wonderful. That feeling that we had at that period, that we could change the world. And I got a chill up and down my spine. And so I discussed that. So fast forward a few days, I'm sitting in Bill Dixon's dining room. We're talking about things. And he turned to me at one point and said, "Milo, do you remember in the late 60s, early 70s, that feeling that we could change the world?" Yeah. So
Mhm.
here was someone who was born in 1925, Mr. Dixon, saying that. And then someone who was about 10 years, a little less than 10 years older than me, saying that same thing. So being part of that kind of nova, that kind of like human potential that was in the air, and riding in the midst of that energy, that was a huge motivation. And that's something I've clung on to, um, in terms of how I've attempted to conduct myself in doing the music and in terms of how I conduct myself as a person. That impetus, that feeling, even though it's all been co-opted at this point.
Yeah, and I've seen in things on your website and other interviews and stuff. There's certain terms that kind of come up quite a lot, and some of them that I had to look it up to see exactly what it meant. But like autodidact, and so that basically means self-taught. So like, so is that completely how you were? You didn't take lessons on any of the instruments. You just figured out how you wanted to do it.
There are two
As
types
part.
of an autodidact. One type is you learn it all on your own. So and you learn it in the traditional way. So you're a saxophonist and you learn the scales and you learn the changes and all this, but you don't take any lessons. That's one form. That wasn't the form that interested me. It's more like what you're getting at, where you take the raw materials and you start to work with them and allow something to come forth from inside you through the instrument. Um, I had a leg up. My dad was this professional drummer, so I was surrounded by music. But we had a few lessons, but they didn't go well. It was father son butting heads kind of thing. Um, but I was able to pick it up and figure out things, obviously, because it was in the air. Piano, I had maybe 2 years of lessons from a wonderful elderly gentleman named James Allen. A guy. He's just trying to make a few extra bucks in a way. He was had a what would be the all the lines in his face. He lived his life, and he was a fantastic teacher. He'd be sitting there smoking, in the small room and helping me out with stuff. So I took a couple of years of lessons, and then with the clarinet, nothing at all. That a friend of an ex-student, sold me that for $25, and I still have that same clarinet. So for me, and this is something that Cecil Taylor described on an album, Fly, 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 Fly. I think there was just 5 flies in that. And I'm really roughly paraphrasing, but his contention was that if a person works on something, if they deal with something, that a sense of order or form or what have you will come forth. It doesn't have to be based on traditional forms or rules or regulations. It defines itself over time. That really interested me. And of course, that closed a lot of doors in terms of what I'd be able to do if I was attempting to mount something like a career.
Cool. All right. Well, Russ, will you advance to the next slide, or the first real slide after this welcome one?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that one. So, all right. So you started putting out records now. This, I believe, if I look at your discography correctly, is your third album, correct? Because there was
Correct.
Blue Art. So the first one was a bunch of different people, and then after that, for a while, you got together with Steve Janitka, and it was you and him were pretty much the Milo Fine Free Jazz Ensemble for a long time.
Yes. Yes.
So, and I know you put out some albums on your own label, but then this one was, uh, was it an Austrian label, or it was a
Swiss.
Swiss?
Yes.
So anyway, yeah, I mean, is
Uh,
there, we're going to listen to a track off this pretty soon, but is there anything you want to say about this album, or?
well, we were approached by Werner Eulinger and Joe McPhee, or I was approached. They didn't know Steve at all, and it was on the basis of the previous two albums, I guess. And improvisations being free at that point, I was working with kind of a collection of musicians that I work with in various groupings, and that was after a trio with Anthony Cox and Mark Maestrovich that imploded more or less, and that was a gorgeous trio. So when Werner and Joe approached me, I was working with Janitka, and then we recorded we sent them a tape of this material, which was recorded backstage at Anwanton Middle School because we had this residency there, which was an unusual thing for me to have a gig like that. But that's a whole nother story. But the one thing I will say is looking at this cover, I remember so clearly when this came in the mail and I opened it up and I saw this cover. And I might have gone over to Janitka's so that we could see it together. I can't remember exactly how that played out. It was so spot on in terms of what we were on about and what I was on about. Um, the title of the album being "Ha," but if you, yeah, I can't necessarily tell you why, but it for me and for Steve, it blew us away. It captured the essence of the music.
Cool. Yeah, it is
And this
very
was an
cool.
artist named Klaus Baumgartner, who Eulinger was using at the time, early on in the label to do all his covers. So yeah, we, yeah, it was cool, and it
Yeah, I
is
liked.
cool.
And Russ, can you advance to the next one, which is the back cover? And I just want to. So here's the back cover, and it's got. You can see some, if you look close, little pictures of Milo and Steve, and all the other information. But I love this quote here on the top, and let's see if I'm able to read it on here. Spontaneity, freedom, and a measure of boldness have long been the spirit of jazz. The Milo Fine Free Jazz Ensemble's distinction is what they do with it. Um, they're sparse. See, now I can't read it. Can you read it, Milo?
Oh, I can't
Explorations,
make
fine and
yeah,
genetic.
man. That's
Oh, anyway, it's yeah, it's too small. Like I could read it earlier, but anyway, it's just a great quote about your stuff. But actually, what we should probably do instead of like read descriptions is listen to a track, and possibly yeah. So Brian, if in just a moment here you would queue up number 15, I think. I just picked some of the ones that are a little shorter because I think we probably want to listen to the whole thing, um, but we have time limits here. But it's a cool one. That's I think it's piano and guitar on that one. And then as we listen to it, Russ, maybe go to the next slide because then if as people listen, they can read. It's sort of a description of the music that it's kind of small and hard to read too. But yeah, let's listen to some of it. All right, there you have it. That's number 15 by the Milo Fine Free Jazz Ensemble, recorded at Ann Watton Middle School, from the Ha album. And in case anyone's wondering, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a couple of these albums that are in the library's collection and listen to a few tracks. And then after that, we're just going to go into other stuff in Milo's career. We're going to talk about the teenage boat people who are near and dear to my heart. And talk about various other collaborations, some that I was able to witness, and others that I only found out about recently through researching this program, because you've done a lot of really cool collaborations. But yeah, so that one was you on piano and Steve on guitar.
Do you
And
want
then,
to? Do you want me to read that quote? Because I've
oh
got the
yeah,
album
yeah,
here.
if you got it and can read it better, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, pardon me for being my own whatever. But here's the quote: "Spontaneity, freedom, and a measure of boldness have long been the spirit of jazz. The Milo Fine Free Jazz Ensemble's distinction is what they do with it. In their sparse, textured explorations, Fine and Janitka pursue the rapid twists and turns of moods and ideas. Words seem too solid a medium to convey the feel of the ensemble's free jazz. It's more like these two guys have taken apart an alphabet and continuously rearranged the letters into words that, although new and perhaps even in an alien tongue, blaze with the perfect sense of recognition." And that was from Insider Magazine, a local publication from '76. Uh, that that track, that particular cut, you probably could tell it was a tune. Actually, it was one of Steve's little constructions, because at that point we would do what we termed cheap tunes. They were just little structures we'd come up with that yeah, that we enjoyed, and that really wasn't the focus of what we were doing, but we liked getting into that. I should also note that even though the LP is out of print, Martin Davidson of M&M Records in England. Well, he's now in Spain, originally from England. Reissued it as part of a double CD with that album plus the second Hat Hut album, and then an album that was supposed to be released on the Italian Horo label, but Horo went bust, and so it was never released except 35 years later. Now it's on that double CD. So yeah, it was really nice. It was quite wonderful of Martin to buy the tapes from Ulinger and then put them out. So, or reissue them. I'm not a big fan of reissues, but uh, being there was new material that had not been released, that had been proposed to be released. Yeah, I thought it was lovely.
All right, cool. Now, Russ, I wonder if it might be fun just to go back to the cool cover, while we listen to one more piece from this record, and the one before that. That is just because it's such a cool cover, Milo. But I want to hear one more piece from this record, and then we'll go on to Lucid Anarchists, and then we'll go wherever we want after that. But let's listen to one that is drums and guitar, and I believe I picked number 26, which is I believe maybe the last track on side 2.
Yeah, last one.
Must be just the tail end of the one before it.
Exactly.
right, there you go. Number 26 from the Ha album.
Yeah, featuring the best I could do in terms of what manifesting the sounds of birthing a baby.
Yeah. And
Well,
so we got one. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, while that track was playing, we got one question in the chat. What are the McPhee LPs that you and Steve play on from the same label?
There's a double album called MFG in Minnesota. And then there's the album Old Eyes, which was recorded in Paris with a group of French musicians that's been reissued twice. It was a single album, then it was reissued as I believe, a double album, kind of a box thing that Eulinger had going, and then it was reissued as a CD. So it's yeah, MFG in Minnesota and Old Eyes.
Cool. And in a few slides after we do a couple other things, I'm going to show like some shots I got from your website that kind of shows your discography, and so we'll see the cover of that. The cool thing about that album is, for me personally, is that I was at the concert, the MFG show. It was at the Walker Church, and it was you and
Correct.
Steve and Joe McPhee, and so I was at that concert, and then later it came out on an album. So cool. I love that. Um, all right, so Russ, let's advance a few slides to the cover of Lucid Anarchists album, which is the other. But as I said, we're gonna talk a little bit about these albums that are in our collection, and then we're just gonna go into any and all other aspects of Milo's career. Um, and I should say I'll probably like plug this a few times during the show, but Milo has a great website, and it's easy to remember. It's just milofine.com, and you can buy records directly from Milo and CDs, and see all kinds of essays that he's written, and any information that about, like, if you're ever allowed to do concerts again or whatever, there's info on that, and whatnot, because yeah, we'll talk about this later too. You've have your home studio that you've been doing a lot of shows at, and maybe someday that'll come back. um, but yeah, so moving on, this is like maybe almost 10 years, 9 years later, than the Ha album, the Lucid Anarchists Meet with Two Potatoes album. That's another one that we happen to have in the library's collection, so we're highlighting it today. And yeah, any special comments that you have about this album?
Well, actually, it's about 5 years. This one was 81 or so. The pieces on this. Um, Comments about that. Well, first of all, just back to Janitka for a moment. I think he is a really underrated player, and just from the tracks that you played and over my phone, I'm not hearing enough Janitka, but I don't think that's I don't think that's indicative. It's not indicative of what's on the records, first of all, and I think it's an issue with the phone speaker rather than anything else. But yeah, he was really a distinctive player who didn't sound like the other cats uh, doing the avant-garde guitar thing, and I think he was, rather overlooked and unrelated. As far as Lucid Anarchists go, that's got my dad on it. There's solo pieces from Steve and I. There's a duo opening the second side, and then there's two or three trio tracks with my father, which that was, shall we say, it was kind of a difficult gig for a number of reasons. But the stuff that we put on the record was really excellent. And there's a wonderful demonstration of my dad's thing of his playing. He takes an extended solo, which is very elegant and really good.
And I think, and I gotta warn Brian. I think I'm gonna throw you by a curveball, Brian, because I want to play the side B track first. I gave you one on side A and one on side B, and yeah, so I do actually want to play the one on side B first, which is you and Steve and your dad. And I think that's really cool because your dad played for what, 41 years or something with the Minnesota Orchestra, and he,
Right.
obviously had to play what they told him, and whatever. But then occasionally
But he
he
was
would jam with you.
but he was their go-to drummer for all the pop and jazz stuff when they'd have guests, come in. He was the go-to guy, and in fact, people coming into town like Doc Severinsen and of his ilk would ask for my dad. Um,
Hmm.
so he was also doing that kind of work because at heart he was a jazz drummer.
Yeah,
That's where his art really was at.
and I forget where the show was, but I remember I got to see you and your dad play together at least once, and it was either like a little coffee shop or a little pub or something, and I remember he had this huge smile on his face just doing the music with you and the improvised stuff, and I remember that being a really fun gig. Um, so yeah, let's listen to piano, drums, and guitar excerpt from side B of Lucid Anarchists. Here it goes. All right. So that was the well, I guess it's just called Piano plus Drums plus Guitar excerpt from Lucid Anarchists. And so that was you on piano, your dad on drums, and Steve on the guitar, of course. Um, so cool. I mean, he almost sounded like, but like he was playing your style drums, but I'm sure he had his own.
Yeah. Well, except it was, my approach is so much more unorthodox in a sense. Um, uh, but his openness during during the trio section was really quite wonderful. And then it was kind of like I said, quintessential Elliott solo. I haven't heard that in quite a while. That was really nice to revisit. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, Brian, you can stand by because I'm going to wait for a little bit to possibly play that other cut, and you'll see what I got in mind. But keep it there because we might play it. I think we're about halfway through our allotted time. These things are set for 7 to 8:30. There's nothing that says we can't go over if we want to. But yeah, I want to get to talking about some of these other projects and things. Russ, if you could just advance to the next slide, is kind of a funny thing. I found that there's a copy of Lucid Anarchists that is or was on sale on Amazon for $48. So if you want to get a copy, you can go buy it on Amazon for $48, or you can buy it directly from Milo for $6. So you can make
Yeah.
your choice on that. But milofine.com, you can get it for $6. But that's
Thanks,
actually
John.
someone's selling it there. Yeah.
No, I know the distributor, and he's bought stuff from me over the years. I hadn't heard from him for quite a while, but he picked up 10 copies or so of the Reform Art West triple CD, and he always just jacks up the price like crazy. I mean, it's that's fine if you can get someone to play $48. More power to him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's paid me, so I don't have any issue with it. I've got the money I wanted to wholesale, so that's it's up to him. And if people are not going to dig a little deeper to find a better price, so be it.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide. All right, so we're not going to listen to a track off this one. I'm just showing this because this happens to be the other Milo Fine album that we have at the Minneapolis Public Library in our collection. Another outbreak of iconoclasm, two eggs slightly beaten. But yeah, the shortest track on this album is 12 and a half minutes and up to like 18 minutes. So we're probably not going to play any, but it's another one you should check out. Well, you should check out everything. Um, and let's see, let's go to the next slide. Ah, yes. Now, I just wanted to play this is about a 2-minute video, and there's a couple reasons I wanted to play this. Well, because I couldn't find any other Milo Fine free jazz ensemble videos. Um, so this is billed as Milo Fine free jazz ensemble, but you're collaborating with Joe Smith in this case. And it's an interesting thing that a couple days ago I promoted this show on Facebook, and one of my Facebook friends, Dave Moe, who's a a musician in town and stuff like that, he said, "Oh, tell Milo hi from my cousin Joe Smith. He's collaborated with Milo a bunch." And I said, "Well, I just happen to have like a little video queued up of that." So yeah, let's watch this video. This is I think like 2010 or something. Possibly, but it's billed as Milo Fine Free Jazz Ensemble. You're playing a couple pianos over here, and then it pans over and shows Steve, and then it pans back to you. You never get all three of you in the same shot. But let's just watch this little video thing. All right, and there it is. So that's the one video clip I could find on YouTube that was billed as Milo Fine Free Jazz Ensemble.
Well, and I should mention I never really dug that name for the band. And now it's kind of fallen by the wayside. I mean, it was no big decision on my part or anything, but it was the name was initiated kind of as a defense mechanism because ironically, with Joe playing there, Joe and I had a falling out after the band's name originally was Blue Freedom, and then I believe Joe suggested adding New Art Transformation, so it became Blue Freedom's New Art Transformation, and it became a trio with the two of us and Rick Barbeau, and there were certain personal things going on, and I just didn't want to work with them anymore. I mean, despite the fact that they're excellent players. I mean, Joe, when he's on, he's quite brilliant, as kind of shown in this in that YouTube video. But I thought, and so when the band broke up, I wanted to take the name, and Joe actually threatened to sue me if I did. And I said, "Well, I'm the only original member here. You weren't in at the beginning. Rick wasn't in at the beginning, um, and and I just at that point I thought, okay, I'm just going to put my name on the band, and this way I'll never run into this problem again." So it was the Milo Fine Free Jazz Ensemble, and that just continued on. But like I said, I never really dug that. And there's an irony there because, as I pointed out in some liner note I wrote, that um, quote unquote my aesthetic is very much, I'd like to think, and I hope, is involved with a collective aesthetic. That it's all these voices coming together. Um, Even though it unfortunately it had my name, the Milo Fine Free Jazz Ensemble, whereas a group, the British group, the groundbreaking group, the Spontaneous Music Ensemble, which implies a collective, was pretty much under the direction of drummer John Stevens. So yeah, so you had the name of a band that implied a collective, but was kind of directed by someone, and then you had the name with the Milo Fine Free Jazz Ensemble, where, particularly as time went on, I was pulling back and just dealing with issues, not issues, but trying to avoid defaults and keep the music living. So there'd be some talk, but there wasn't any kind of, and there isn't any kind of formal direction.
All right. Well, let's move to the next slide, Russ. And so this is taken from your website, and it just kind of shows there's like this is the only like the first third so far, and we'll show the others in a little bit. But it just kind of shows all the different projects that you've been involved in, starting with Blue Freedom's New Art Transformation, going through a couple of the records that we've been highlighting today. But in here right before, like the Lucid Anarchists, we've got Teenage Boat People, which we're going to be talking about in a minute, and collaborations with Borbeto Magus and Walter Zuber Armstrong and Gutter Cleaners, and we'll be talking about some of that stuff. But and it's got that MFG in Minnesota. Did I say that? Yeah, that's a cool album. So anybody who wants to explore Milo's music, go on his website and you can see all these recordings and things that and different collaborations that he's been involved in, and can check it out.
Yes, and that website is TMI. Too much information. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, next
Yeah.
next slide, Russ. All right, so this is a picture of the Teenage Boat People. I think this is the same photo that was used on the cover of you guys put out an EP of 4 songs. And so besides being a librarian, for people who don't know, I did radio on KFAI for over 10 years, like 1980 through 91. I
Okay.
had a program called Rock of Rages. And the very first interview I ever did, so I wasn't very good at interviewing to begin with, um, but it was with the Teenage Boat People, which was two of the main members, Jeff Johnson and yourself, came on my radio show. And I remember I saw Teenage Boat People performance of you and Jeff at your home studio, and I burned to a disc copy of that interview, and you weren't so pleased years later with how you sounded, but it was great to have you be on the radio show way back then and stuff. So
No, that was all about me. That wasn't your issue at all, John. You did pardon me, a fine job, but my piss and vinegar kind of overtook me during that interview, and so it was yeah, it was a nice, as I said to you, and I mentioned this to Russ. It was a nice splash of cold water when I heard this. Like, whoa, yeah, okay, because I was at that point, that whole "we can change the world," I was I was on a soapbox, definitely. And it wasn't really in keeping with who I am, I don't think, even back then. uh but it it was just it was good to hear. It was good to revisit.
yeah. So yeah, but so the Teenage Boat People, and we're gonna watch a more recent Teenage Boat People video in a few minutes here. But it was kind of more of a rock structured thing, but with a lot of improvisation. And you actually played a gig at Seventh Street Entry, headlined a gig at Seventh Street Entry, and I think I was still too young to legally get in, but I think you might have helped sneak me in or something. Um, and it was a great gig, Teenage Boat People. And can you show the next slide, Russ? You
Yeah.
actually, Milo Fine Free Jazz Ensemble actually opened that show at 7th Street Entry, and you ended up uh, releasing an album, Get Down, Shove It, It's Tango Time, which was that set, released from the 7th Street Entry when you opened for Teenage Boat People. So that's kind of cool. Um, and let's see. So this shows you playing clarinet. I guess it must have been a photo from that show, I assume.
No,
Um,
no, this
maybe
was
not, because that
from a
doesn't look like 7th Street.
yeah, it was from I believe Walker Community, not the Walker Church, but there was another Walker Church that the West Bank School of Music was utilizing. And yeah, it was just our positioning there, and the title being "Get Down, Shove It, It's Tango Time" somehow juxtaposed. So that's why we use that photo.
All right, and then flash forward to the next slide, and there you are in the same position, playing clarinet. But this was 2 years.
Well done.
This was 2 years ago. This was at the Heliotrope Festival, um, at the Avalon Theater, and Teenage Boat People played a gig. So you guys were together back in whenever that was, the late 70s, early 80s, or it
Yeah,
must have been early 80s. Yeah. And then you
yeah,
didn't do anything
70.
for a while.
Yeah, 79, 81, and then Jeff approached me in 2009 to get the band back together.
Yeah, and so then I saw you guys played as a duo, at least one show, probably more. I saw one at your home studio, which was you and Jeff as Teenage Boat People, and then 2 years ago, 2019, you played a set with. Then we're gonna watch a clip in just a moment with an augmented, with a bigger band, like 5 people. Um, and Russ, you could advance to that slide, but just don't start it quite yet. So Milo, if you want to like name like who all is playing on this, if
Yes,
you're
on to the left of the photo is Charles Gillette, a longtime valued colleague, dear friend, and then Jeff and myself, and then Sam Wildenauer on bass and Emerson Agard on soprano sax. Ironically, Sam, I got to know when he was a kid, and he took drum lessons. Um, and then a number of years ago, we started working together. I really enjoy working with him. And Emerson came to town just, I don't know how many years ago, the whole time thing. And someone recommended me that he should get in touch with me because he was interested in improvisation and free improvisation. So he contacted me and has become a good friend as well, as has Sam.
Yeah, so cool. So yeah, I remember you started this. So this is actually a video that I took this video with my phone, and this is like a 3 minute or so excerpt from your set. But I actually recorded the entire set and recently asked you, and you asked all the other members and got their permission, and I put that up on YouTube. So if you want to see the entire set from the Heliotrope Festival, it's about 55 minutes long. Just go on YouTube and put in Teenage Boat People, and it should come up. But we're gonna watch the about a 3 minute excerpt. Oh, and then and the part that I didn't get, that photo that I had before, you started playing clarinet out in the lobby, and you kind of like walked around, and then you went in through the doors and played clarinet all till you got up on the stage. And that part I didn't get in the video because wasn't ready yet. But anyway, this is from the middle of the set somewhere, and it starts off with a little bit of you on piano, but then mostly drums. And so yeah, roll the video. Russ, can you stop it? Something's weird. I don't know if you guys are seeing it, but something's weird. Like the video isn't really syncing very well. Do you see that?
Uh, I'm
I,
not sure.
oh, it wasn't like the video, like the sound and the video weren't quite like working together. Maybe.
I think that's kind of appropriate.
Okay, well here, to try playing it a little bit more, and we'll see what it does. All right, there. I think it was working a little better after we restarted it. But yeah, that's Teenage Boat People, an excerpt from the show at Heliotrope in 2019. And like I said, if you want to see the entire set, I filmed it and put it up on the YouTubes, so you could do that. Um, let's see. Can you go to the next slide, Russ? All right, now this is an interesting story. Just because we're on Heliotrope. I saw you at another one of the Heliotrope festivals a few years previous to the last one at Avalon, and this time it was at the Suvac Gallery, I believe, on Lindale, and you played a solo percussion performance at that show. Um, and I remember, I think you had a drum kit or something, but then you had all these cymbals all over on the floor, and you announced that this was the last time you were going to perform this particular piece or with these particular symbols or whatever it was. And so then after the set, people could come up and take whatever they wanted. And so I watched your set, and then I went up and I got a couple of these symbols from you. And this is a picture taken this afternoon. Um, it's it's yard art in my yard. I think I've got two of your symbols, and they move around, and so your symbol is in my backyard right now.
Oh, that's really cool. And you had told me about this soon afterwards, I believe, and had always told me you were going to show me a picture. But this is the first time I've seen it. That's great. Thanks. Cool. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I called them floor symbols, and I think that set was I was playing solo clarinet, and then I had the cymbals on the floor. If I'm thinking of
Oh,
the right set.
oh, that
Um,
might have been what was going on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then it was a solo thing, and then Paul Metzger did a solo thing, and then we played duo, and it was ironic. Interestingly, when I leapt onto the cymbals at one point and hit a note on the clarinet, I really did a number on one of my ears. I think I broke a couple of nerve hairs in there just because of that frequency at that moment. Plus, I was dealing with some anger, with some things going on around concerning the festival, and it was internalized. So at that moment, yeah, I did a number, but years later now, that's actually cleared up. The ear doc told me he didn't know whether it would because you don't grow back new nerve hairs if they're damaged. But yeah, that's subsided. So that's a whole subtext story or whatnot.
All right. Well, let's jump to the next slide, and you will see in a moment why I am showing this slide. This is a picture of Goofy's upper deck. It it does not exist anymore. This whole building structure doesn't exist anymore. It's a parking lot, but there used to be Market Barbecue on the corner, then Goofy's, which was some kind of a bar and strip club downstairs, and then they for about a year and a half or 2 years, the upper Goofy's upper deck was turned into like a punk rock, mostly a punk rock club. And there's a guy named Fred Gartner who ran the place. And I discovered you've got a whole essay about Fred or a lot about Fred on your website, Milo,
Yeah.
because he was going to put you in a movie or something, and he moved out to Hollywood later. And but besides booking punk rock, he booked uh, one of your projects, which I don't think, looking through your discography, that there's any albums or anything. But
No.
you had a project called Groyd, and Groyd played a few shows that I remember I was at Goofy's Upper Deck. So what can you tell us about Groyd?
Well,
and
the,
that
the
whole.
first thing I'd like to clear up is a couple of years ago, Charles Gillette informed me as to the negative connotation of the word Groyd. That there's a racist connotation, which I did set me back. I was horrified, and I told them, well, no, that's not where the name Groyd came from. There was a band, a rock band that another ex drum student of mine was in called Gordon Heimer, and he was the drummer. Uh, and Steve and I did a session with them. They were kind of interested in, I think, at Terry's urging, to do something more open, more free improvisational. So we played with them, and then I did one concert with them, and we did a recording session, and that came out as a very limited edition LP. And Terry and I weren't informed. I was very much put out by that these three guys would just go ahead and press this album. It's kind of like a heavy metal meets Beefheart. There's a Beefheartian quality to it, and I, I enjoyed playing. I enjoyed my playing on it. I mean, I'm not, and this was around the time of the Boat People as well. So what happened was when that band broke up, and Terry and I were pretty angry that they had gone ahead and put out the album. The other three guys, we decided to do it as a duo, and we were coming up with a name. Terry had a nickname, and there was a little kind of an icon that he drew because he was pretty good at illustration. And it was his nickname in the band was Groydenheimer. That was just, it was a riff on Gordenheimer. They just started calling him Groydenheimer. Now, whether these young suburban guys were racist, overt or covert racist, I don't know. I didn't get that sense from them, but one never knows. So it was just a nickname. So being the guys were calling him Groydenheimer, we decided to call our duo Groyd, which became a trio later on with a painter who was doing some sound vocal stuff. His name's Tim Misk. Um, so that's where the name came from, and I just like that to go on the record. So we started out by doing these little tunes of his. He would have these little poems or whatnot, lyrics, I guess. And the first gig he booked was, we had a battle of the bands at Skateville in Burnsville. So you had all these rock bands, and then you had he and I doing noise stuff. I believe he was using his motors at that time, and I had a Casio, and I was playing the clarinet. Needless to say, we got no votes. Um, and then soon thereafter, it evolved into a more direct noise noise group that was the focus. So it was improvised, and the whole lyric content was gone. So it was a sound sculpturing kind of thing. And I guess I should mention that the stuff you played up to this point is pretty dense and high energy, and some people would find it discordant or whatnot. And I just want to make it clear, again, for the record, I guess, that's not my only approach to doing improvised music. There's a lot of directions in terms of a sparseness, or in terms of something that could be construed as overtly melodic or whatnot. So anyway, yeah, that's the background to Groyd.
All right, and then another just quick funny story that I remember, and I don't know if I have all the details correct in my mind, but I'm pretty sure that there was one night where uh, at First Avenue, it was Prince was playing, and it was a benefit for the Minnesota Dance Theater, and it turned out to be this amazing historic concert. I was there, and he did the basic tracks for Purple Rain and stuff like that. But earlier on the same day or evening, there was a concert at the upper deck, and it was I think it was like a punk band, Government Issue, or some, but then the one of the opening bands was Groyd. And but for some reason Fred had this idea, and he was just like, Government Issue, blah blah blah. and special secret international recording artist or something like that.
Oh,
and
God,
and the
right.
and the international recording artist was you, because you'd had albums out on Swiss labels and stuff. And Fred thought it was so funny that Steve McClellan from First Avenue was like, who you got, who's this international recording artist? And I mean, he's having Prince play over there, so what's he worried about? But he was all intrigued, and you were the international recording artist. I thought that was kind of
Oops.
funny.
Yeah, yeah. Oops.
Anyway, God, we're running out of time, and I got a few more things I want to make sure to get to. Russ, can you go to the next slide? This is what I was telling you about, Milo. We ran this past our lawyers, and we thought maybe we should edit the poster in case we wanted to put this up somewhere and didn't want to worry about kids seeing it. But I think you can get the idea. So this is a poster that Fred from the Upper Deck put together for a show that it was at First Avenue. And it's a joke because this is the guy who ran Goofy's and kind of ended up not having a real great relationship with Fred and the crowd and stuff like that. So he's like, oh no, another punk rock show, this time at First Avenue with that Husker Du band. Impaler and Groyd will be starting things off, etc.
With
And
that stuff they call music.
yeah. And so this is, maybe I was telling Russell earlier today that this is maybe the one time that you performed on the main stage at First Avenue. Like, what a show. You got to play with Impaler, who was another band that played at or at Goofy's Upper Deck all the time, and Husker Du. And so I just thought it'd be funny to throw in that poster.
I think Husker Du was invited us, or Tim Misk arranged that, and Terry Ingram had an association with longstanding association with Impaler.
It's funny. Tim Misk's a good friend of mine. And we were actually roommates at one point,
What?
and but he's changed his name. He legally changed his name to Man Hawks like years ago. Um, but yeah. Anyway, I was surprised. I didn't really realize that you collaborated with him.
I've got
Um,
one of his paintings in the studio.
cool. All right, Russ. Let's try to whip through these things. Let's get to the next one. I just kind
Yeah,
of wanted to show
more
some.
stuff.
So some more, like, yeah, I you can explore this on your own if you're interested in Milo's stuff, but lots of different collaborations. Derek Bailey and who else do I see here? Different people. All right, let's see, next one.
And more people.
And more, and this I think it's kind of cool. Another one of you mentioned Paul Metzger earlier. There's a thing with you, Paul Metzger and Davu Seru, at this place called Medusa, which was kind of this semi-underground place on the West Bank or something, or somewhere near the U. And I went to that concert, and again, that was another one that you ended up then releasing on
Oh.
an album. So I was lucky. I was at a few of the shows that you released as albums.
Yeah, and there's more
Um,
material on of from that evening on the split album I did with Paul on the
oh, cool.
last page. You don't have to flip it back, Russell, but yeah, there's a split LP that we did that was from that same night at Medusa, and Medusa no longer exists.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one.
Uh-oh.
You go to the next slide, Russell. Oh, something's not working.
There's just that interesting little
Uh,
sound.
uh,
Ah,
oh, what's
oh,
that?
we have a little cloud icon. Oh, okay.
Oh, well, I wanted to show something. Okay, here, I'm gonna try something here.
Hey, Ben. Lou, there you are again with your rainbow suspenders. You guys are putting up with all of this. Oh God, Charles and Glenn. Elaine, there she is. The bee woman. Yes. I mean, you've heard
I'm
all
trying to
this
just.
stuff before. So, oh, no, not all the stuff. Oh God, I held back, huh? That's amazing. A little discipline, huh? On my part.
Russ, are you still having technical issues? Because I could try to take it over, and I just had a couple more video clips I wanted to play. I don't even know if Russ
Yes, the vagaries of technology.
is still there.
Sam, there, Sam, and Emerson probably there. Yeah. Okay.
Nice to see you, Milo.
Good to almost see you as well. There you are.
Okay, I just tried to share my screen. Do you all see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see if this works. I don't know what happened to Russ's setup, but I wanted to play a 1 minute clip from this is like a 2 hour performance, I think, that you did at the Kitty Cat Club in
Yes.
Dinkytown. And this is another thing that, another thing for you, you're playing a bunch of electronics and stuff. So it's just a 1 minute clip from that. But so that's something else that you have in up your sleeve. Here, I'll play this if it works. All right, so there we go. 1 minute of noise. So that's like a whole nother thing for you.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. It is, and it was nice to know that as recent as that happened. How many years ago was that? What year was that?
I think that was maybe 2015 or something like that.
Okay, and I could still piss off a club owner who would not have me back, but in a good-natured way. And I'm old enough that he was just flummoxed, and
It was like
I just
a little too much for him or something.
yeah, yeah. And this is interesting because this was a noise night. Every whatever night this was, Tuesday or Thursday night at the Kitty Cat Club, was something that Kevin Cosgrove and some woman booked as a noise night. But the fact that I did this for 2 hours, and of course, it created some discussion because there were people who naturally felt that it went on too long or whatnot. I mean, they liked the beginning of it, but when I was digging in, it was, yeah, they lost interest, which is fine. I mean, that's fair, but I think it speaks to the short attention span, the little clips that people are used to hearing, and that's all they want to concentrate on.
All right. Well, I'm just going to jump ahead because we are close to our allotted time. We can go a little bit over if we want. But I know that you said you wanted to talk a little bit about this collaboration, which I wasn't too familiar with before, of you with a couple players. I believe it's in Austria, and you've had a couple trips there. And so tell us about this.
Trying to make this real quick. Someone was raising their hand, I think, but maybe they're not raising their hand anymore. But they can ask a question in chat. This is the Reform Art Unit. This is Fritz Novotny and on the reeds and Paul Fields on violin. Both have since passed away. This was on my last visit there, which was in 2018. This was a group that had been around since 1965 or so. So they were part of that whole first explosion. And stuff in Vienna was already happening in the late 50s in terms of free improvisation. I am in this clip, I am playing Walter Malley's drum set. Now, most people wouldn't know who Walter Malley is, but he was a groundbreaking guy in Vienna, played drums and soprano saxophone, and was also quite a brilliant painter and contributed artwork to some of the Reform Art Unit CDs. I got to know Fritz via mail for many, many years, and then first met him in '96 and went over there, as you mentioned, several times, and brought he and the late Sepp Mitterbauer here to the studio for 3 evenings, which was, yeah, it was quite lovely. And Sepp passed away later that year. So this was at a small space in Gmunden, Austria, that we convened this trio, which was named Three Motions.
All right, and this whole set, or I don't know, or segment of it, or something, is also available on YouTube. I'm just going to play about like I think a minute and a half, minute 45
Sure,
second
sure.
segment from it. But if people are interested, they can find the whole thing. So. All right, so yeah, a little taste of that. So that's pretty cool that you've actually been able to travel to cool places and meet these different people to collaborate with.
Very occasionally, I should make clear. But I had a relationship of sorts. Well, yeah, I could say I definitely had a relationship with these guys, and back to Walter's kit. Walter passed away a good number of years ago, and it was his son who made it possible for me to play the kit, just as kind of an homage, as it were.
All right. And one more thing that I wanted to make sure to play just a little bit about, or talk just a little bit about, is this gutter cleaners, because I find this pretty interesting. There's a whole documentary on YouTube, and I thought maybe we'd watch the first couple, 2, 3 minutes of it. But that's like a whole thing you did with, you played improvised music accompanying a dancer, and yeah, I thought it was pretty cool, and now I'm sad that I never actually got to see a gutter cleaners performance.
You
But
and almost everybody else never got to see
but
gutter
here
cleaners. Yeah,
I'm just going to play a little bit of the beginning of this that kind of explains some of that.
sure.
It's pretty cool. Oops, wait, that's not the beginning. Here's the beginning.
So gutter cleaners, its inception in 1982 was rather serendipitous, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I got a cold call from Jim Ten Bensel, gigging musician, asking me if I'd want to audition to accompany dance classes for 3 visiting choreographers. I'd always wanted to work with dancers, but didn't move in those circles either. And two, it was a paying gig, and so I said, "Yeah, I'll audition for this thing, but please understand, I'm not your typical dance accompanist. I'll be improvising." He said that was fine, so I went and did the audition and got the gig. At these classes, Susan was dancing, and I was very struck by the commitment and focus she had. When she moved across the floor, she really moved across the floor. So after a class, I mustered up my courage and approached her and asked her if she would be interested in doing something dealing with improvised music and dance.
I was in New York for, I think, about 5.5 months and was fortunate enough to get a scholarship with Jennifer Muller in the Works Modern Dance. That was in 1980-81. And then the workshop that Milo is talking about was in March, I think, of 1982. At that point, I think I probably had about 15 years of training under my belt. I trained ballet in New York and in Ohio and Wisconsin.
All right. Well, just there's a little taste of the gutter cleaners. And there's a whole, I forget, it's like a half-hour documentary or
Yeah,
something
it's a
that
20
goes on.
minutes, half hour, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something else that you can find on YouTube and explore. I had a few more things. I don't know if we want to show them or if we're up kind of out of time. I had a thing, charcoal, you, Anthony Cox, and Dave Davu Saru, one of you, and Viv, a vocalist, and some other things. But as always, when I host one of these things, we always go over time. I think because I have such interesting guests and a lot to talk about and lots to. So
So,
I don't know.
Jonathan and Milo, there was a
Yeah.
couple of questions in the chat. I was wondering if I could just jump in and read those to you real quick. This is
Oh yeah,
Brian.
let's do that. Yeah, instead of playing, there's endless videos on YouTube and stuff. So maybe if people are
Yeah, too
interested, they
endless.
can explore. But so what I'm going to do is, yeah, okay, there. Yeah, so let's do the chat questions and go with that.
Okay. I'll just read them both and then you can sort them out however you want to answer them, Milo. The first one was what's a recent, and then in parentheses, they say define recent however you choose, musical discovery, rediscovery that you've been excited about. And then another question was, would you talk a bit about your membership in the RAU?
Oh, okay. Yeah, again, what was the first question? Had to do with something I.
Just a recent, and then define recent however you choose, musical discovery or rediscovery you've been excited about.
Uh, that's that. that's an ongoing, that's part of the ongoing process. It's I practice, so I practice every day, and of course with the pandemic and all, I've continued the work. So what I found is aspects of my playing, technical aspects in a way that have been what I don't interesting is too generic a word, but it's kept me thinking and kept me active, and this has always gone on with practice, and maybe because of not doing any concerts or anything, I'm more aware of how this material surfaces from inside me and goes into the instruments. A big thing for me is trying to avoid, circumvent, or explode or implode defaults, so that I get into something that keeps me on my toes and keeps things fresh for me. So I would say that. And then I actually, in terms of an external thing, I picked up a CD of Derek Bailey and a saxophonist playing soprano named Mototaro Tagagi, who I'd never heard before. This was from 1987, and this guy is close to my heart because there's a very raw autodidactic feel to his playing. Um, and so it's not the shredding that has come to dominate this field of music, just like it dominates every other field of music. It's just this overt shredding. And yeah, shredders can play some great stuff, absolutely. But too often shredding becomes a thing in itself. So this saxophonist, hearing him it was like, yeah, that's getting back to the roots that anything is possible and you can find your own path. He's got a little bit of Lacey in him, but not much. And in a certain sense, there's linkage to, I see him on the screen right now, Emerson Agard, in terms of the sound and direction. And the RAU thing happened early on. I did reviewing stuff as an ancillary activity, and I was more known as a reviewer, as most of the people who are here will have heard me say a million times. Um, because the reviews got published, I was more known as a reviewer than as a musician, though the music was always first and foremost. So I was hungry to hear other people. So I would read about people and I would write to them and say, hey, I'm doing reviews. So, would you send me some material? I'll review it and I'll send you copies of the published reviews. That's initially how I got in touch with Fritz Novotny. So we corresponded for years and we traded records. And then in 1996, I had the opportunity to go to Vienna, unfortunately, just to cover a festival, Franz Kogelmann Festival. I say unfortunately because I wanted to go and play. But what I did was I reached out to Fritz and said, hey, I'm coming over. Is there any chance we could get together to play? So while I was covering this festival in the evening, during the day, I was hanging out with Fritz, and we did a recording session that came out as with Milo Fine, the Reform Art Unit. And that started a regular thing. I regretted not being able to play or meet with Walter Malley in 96. So on the very next year, Fritz invited me again and managed to put a thing together, a package together, a way to get me there with Walter Malley. So I did have the opportunity to meet and play with him. I should note very briefly that on a couple of YouTube things, you see me playing the drum kit with rags. That's something I saw Walter Malley do in 97. And not only the sound, but the visual really struck me. But I vowed never to do it except when I was playing with the RAU or when I had Fritz and Sepp here, then I brought out the rags. Otherwise, no. And again, that's a form of homage and respect. So I ended up going back a few times and playing with them. And at one point, Fritz announced that I was actually a member of the RAU, which quite frankly touched me because they they had been at it so long, and to be accepted in that way was very cool. And then I brought Sepp and Fritz here. I took it upon myself to do it because as it says in one of these videos, that I tried to get funding to do that, but that's a whole nother can of worms that I won't open up here. So I took it upon myself to bring Sepp and Fritz here to collaborate with musicians, including Davu, Paul, Benjamin J. Mansavage Klein, Elaine Evans, and Daniel Ferruta. And it was 3 just really wonderful evenings that I released on a triple CD. And there's an LP available of just excerpts from those 3 nights. So that's how, and then in the interim, as I mentioned, Walter, Sepp, Fritz, and now Paul have all departed, as they say, this mortal coil. So I think that I can't see someone carrying on the RAU Reform Art Unit banner. So that's how it happened.
All right, I'm seeing more things in the chat. We have a question. You talked about Coltrane and Shep as 2 of the first discoveries. What led to clarinet and not sax?
That's just because the clarinet walked into my life. But the stuff I started doing on the clarinet, I'm going to plug my phone in here because I got low power notice. Yeah, an ex-student, a friend of an ex-student, wanted to sell a clarinet, and I always wanted to have an instrument, or not always, but I wanted to have an instrument where I didn't have any formal work with at all. So at first it was going to be the cello, which I played on Blue Freedom's New Art Transformation, that LP. And then the clarinet walked into my life, and it was all that hard blowing, high register stuff that appealed to me, and still does, quite frankly. And so I got the clarinet for $25 and stuck with it, and that's why. It was just serendipity. It was just I ended up with a clarinet, and then later on, Curtis Wenzel, who I've reconnected up with, he's on Improvisations Being Free. He gave me his alto clarinet, and Joe Smith gave me an E-flat clarinet. So I've got 3 clarinets that I work, but that's how I ended up with a clarinet rather than a sax. Though I should say I played soprano sax on the Gordon Heimer LP. I can't remember who loaned that to me. It might have been Curtis, but maybe not. Anyway, I had a soprano sax for a short amount of time, which I really enjoyed. But I've got enough instruments to take care of, I guess, and work on.
Well, cool. And I was gonna play another track from Lucid Anarchists of you doing solo sax, and ended up not because we're running out of time. We saw a couple pictures of you, or not sax, clarinet. We saw a couple pictures of you playing clarinet. But if anyone wants to hear Milo play clarinet, there's YouTube stuff out, and there's plenty on albums, and you should check that out too. So Russell came back and said, "Hello again, everyone. I'm back after some technical difficulties. I thought I'd inject a little improvisation into tonight's program." And so thank you, Russell, for that. And
well done.
in case you were gone for a while, and I was able to take over, and I took over the slideshow and showed a couple more videos and stuff, and now we're just people are having questions, so we're keeping going. Someone was asking about the name of that saxophonist in the chat. And somebody's
the Japanese gentleman I mentioned.
Yeah, I think somebody answered Moto Teru Takagi. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's right.
Oh, and I guess and then the only other thing is a different Milo W guest says thank you, and thank you, Milo, for your thoughtful response.
Oh.
So yeah, I guess that's caught up with everything in the chat. Let's see. I'm just gonna copy one other thing and throw it in the chat. If anybody wants to, there's a survey that that you can say how you like the show. Well, there was one other thing that Russ wanted me to throw in there. And then this is a plug for something that we got coming up
Sure.
on May 6th. But yeah, besides that, well, thanks so much, Milo, for taking an evening to chat with us about your stuff. And like I said before, as always seems to happen with these programs, we've gone over time, but didn't even get to like everything I wanted to get to. And there's so much stuff out there. But I hope that people have gotten an interest for your stuff and might explore it on their own later or whatever.
Well, John, again, to say what I said at the outset, I just appreciate getting the invitation out of the blue. This is something that doesn't happen very often with me for a lot of reasons, and that's cool. And so this was, this was lovely. And I'm sorry if I went on a bit too long in terms of answering questions. I guess I just wanted to be thorough. And
Oh
besides,
yeah,
I
let's say. Yeah, no, I mean this happens quite often. I had a whole different kind of music. I had Dr. Fink on a while ago to talk about his work with Prince, and it was the same thing. We went almost 2 hours on that show, but it was fascinating. So it's always a good time. And yeah, so I mean, I guess that's it. Unless anybody has any other questions, or if you have any other final comments or anything like that.
no, Lord, no. I think I've commented enough.
All right. Well, let's hope. Again, if people want to go to find out more about Milo's stuff, it's milofine.com. And before COVID hit, you were doing all kinds of like cool shows in your home studio. And like I said, I went to one of them and wish I could go to more. And so we'll see if that ever is able to happen again. But let's hope that we can get some live
Well,
gigs down the line here.
barring life's vagaries, I hope to start up in 2022, the spring of 2022 again. I'm hopeful that they'll get a handle on this, on the pandemic and the vaccines and all of that, so that I'll be able to start up again then.
All right, cool. Well, we'll look forward to it. All right. Well, I guess that's it for tonight.
Thanks,
Oh,
John.
okay. Hold on. There's one more question that just came in. So let's just.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
do you have a preference about which of your recordings someone should start with? I guess if they're just getting
Oh,
into your stuff.
uh, uh, actually, that's really tricky because I cut a pretty wide swath in terms of things explored. And I don't adhere to a specific school of free jazz or improvised music, and I don't purposefully. I'm not a forced eclectic either. On the other hand, it's what's in the moment. I'm thinking for someone who's not. Who's more of a novice. I'm thinking that perhaps a more recent document, Apophenia, could be a good place to start a CD. There's also, the last thing I did was a duo with Joseph Damon, guitarist, called Acceptance of Sorrow. And I think there are aspects of that could, what, that that someone not familiar with the music could more readily relate to.
All right. Well, once again, thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks everybody for attending. It's been
Well,
fun.
yeah, I'd like to
And
thank everybody for attending too. Good Lord. Yeah, it was nice to see some of your ebullient, I shouldn't try those big words, lovely faces, and to know you were there. And so, yeah, thanks for doing this thing.
all right. Well, keep tuned for other Vinyl Revival album encounters. We try to do them at least once a month, and there'll be more coming up.
More power to you, John. Thanks again, man.
Yep. Bye bye. We'll see you soon.
Okay, take care.